no game on Saturday, but a natural stopping point here, I think, for at least for you and I, to say, okay, enough of a sample size here. There's enough data points to give I think a reasonable evaluation of where this team is so far. So let's kind of dive right in with that thought right there, Anthony. And I'd love your thoughts on where you think this team is compared to where you expected they'd be.
Yeah, no, and one thing that I want to hit on first is just how important Saturday was, like beyond winning the game and going to 4-0 and beating Notre Dame, all that stuff. Going into a bye week off of a win is I hadn't thought about it literally till you just said it right there. Just going into a bye week off of a win is so important. Like, just imagine having that bad taste in your mouth, for 2 weeks, like not having the chance to, sometimes off a tough loss, right? If you are on the losing side, it's really nice to just wash it, flush it, and get into the new week. But when you come into a bye week off of a loss as opposed to a win, it just lingers with you. So that's so big, I think, for Ohio State. Just as this week goes along, they have time to just get healthy, and they can do it with positive mindsets, right? Because they are, coming off that huge win. And really, as the team stands right now, I think it's exactly one of the things that we talked about last week, where they're on this just steady trajectory upward. It hasn't been perfect, right? There's been some bumps in the road, but they're just steadily getting better. Like, go back to that Indiana game. I was just looking through some of our notes from a couple of weeks ago, and Indiana kind of played them really tough. And it's turning out that Indiana's not great. Like, Akron took Indiana to the wire on Saturday. So and remember that game, how uncomfortable we felt. And then going into Youngstown State, felt a little bit better. And then we took that big step against Western Kentucky, and now you're feeling good. And then you play Saturday's game, and you come out of it feeling like, okay, this is the team we were expecting. Took some learning curves and took a little bit to get going, but this is the Ohio State team that we were looking forward to seeing.
And I think for me, that's kind of what has made this year fun. It's fun to win. It's fun to be around a group that's good. That's for sure. But part of what you love about college football is it's a different team every year, right? And some years it's a very different team. And I think Ohio State, was, I don't want to call it learning on the fly, but there was some unsettling in some of those position groups. Obviously, the quarterback one is, the most obvious one, right? Like, Ryan Day didn't have a decision made for a couple of weeks into the season. And so there was some inconsistencies at quarterback, but enough that I thought, Kyle could be named the starter pretty quickly. And eventually, after 2 games, he was. The offensive line obviously has had some growing pains. I'd like to see them better in the run game, but I think they've done a pretty decent job keeping Kyle and at times Devin upright when they've had chances. I think the depth in the running back room has been impressive, but I expected that their numbers might look slightly better. It's been interesting to see how few possessions Ohio State's had this season. And it's not just because of teams trying to milk the ball. Like, Notre Dame wasn't going to just try to sit on it offensively and see if they could outlast Ohio State. And yet that game, there were times where you looked up at the clock, you're like, wait a second, how much time's left? The game kind of flew. So it's been an interesting year. It's been a fun year so far. And I'm sure some of that's because of the fact that, they just beat Notre Dame. But I firmly believe that Ohio State's 2 biggest tests are ahead of them. I think Penn State and Michigan are both better than Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's a very good team. But I am more concerned about Penn State and Michigan than I was about Notre Dame.
Well, I'll tell you what, that Penn State team that we're kind of staring down the barrel of seeing in a couple weeks is there. That's a good football team. That's a really, really good football team. And one of the really good things for Ohio State, we were looking at their schedule last night. It almost got split up perfectly, where it's almost you can slice it into 3s, right? So you take the first third of the season, where the big game at the end is Notre Dame. Okay. And they passed the first test, right? They go 4-0. continuing to get better. And then you look at the middle, the second slice of the season. You get a bye week, then you have 2 games. We got Maryland next week, and then it ends with Penn State. And then the final third of the season is another 3 games that ends with Michigan. So it gives you the opportunity to really, like, mentally, for the team's perspective, like, hey, so let's split this thing into thirds and let's win each third. And by winning each third, you want to go undefeated. You need to probably go undefeated in each third, but you need to continue to get better. And it's like Notre Dame presented a very unique test to Ohio State, but Penn State's going to present a very unique test to Ohio State. And then Michigan at the end of the year is going to present a very new test to them. So it's almost like you can, like, hey, we're going to spend the next month focusing on, in the back of our minds, like, right, we don't want to overlook any opponent, but we want to focus on, hey, Penn State's going to have an elite passing game. They really are, and it's kind of grown into fruition there. And they also going to have a really good defense. What's that?
I mean, Singleton and Allen can run, man. I mean, they're balanced. They're legit.
They're really good. And then when you think about Michigan at the end of the year, right, we've had our problems with them, right, where they can punch in the mouth, but they can also get the big plays through the air. So I think it's really cool how the season split itself up to where, all right, now we're focused on, right, we got to take care of business in some of our now Big Ten games, but at the end of this third, right, we have an awesome Penn State team that we're going to have to handle here in a couple of weeks.
So I guess I understand. I agree with a chunk of what you're saying there, but I'm almost looking at it from an even, tighter window. I think it's kind of nice that Ohio State has their 3 biggest games spread out, and I guess technically spread out evenly. But I almost feel like this team needs to be hyper focused on what is right in front of them. And, the reality is, like, I don't expect Ohio State to lose to Maryland, but I think Maryland's probably the 4th best team in the Big Ten. They're having a really solid season so far. They've got a good quarterback, and they are going to come to Columbus with absolutely nothing to lose. I think that could potentially, for stretches, maybe look like the first half of the Michigan-Rutgers game last week, where it was tight. And if you don't have 100% focus, then you could find yourself in a dogfight late.